Hey everybody, welcome into the Falaya Focus studio, where today we're here talking with Randall Nachman of Novateus. It's a long time coming. He's been a partner of ours, helping us develop our web and mobile application, and it's going to be awesome to sit here and talk about what we've been doing over the last 2 years, hear a little bit about what he's got going on, what software development's all about, and how to manage a remote team, and how to really execute at scale. So welcome in, Randall.
Man, I appreciate you having me. And you're right. We've been working together on this for, seems like years now. So
yeah, I mean,
good to finally talk about it with other people.
Yeah, I think it was, we started developing March 2020, I think is when we started. So It's been 2.5 years, right about.
Perfect timing too. With
you know, right. Yeah, right as COVID locked down. Remember we were oh no, the whole world shut down. But it gave us time to because at that time, remember we were, I was migrating from one developer to you, right? And we had to redevelop everything.
Yeah, it was a good opportunity.
Yeah,
good opportunity to rethink what was important, what's your goals, and really the problems you were trying to solve and how we were going to solve them. Every app that you develop, you would hope you're solving a problem, and it's a big problem. And your users that you're marketing to, they migrate to that. They adopt it and ultimately love what you're doing. That's I think the ultimate goal.
Yeah, I mean, it was just, we pretty much had to scrap it, I mean, we scrapped it. We started with all new screens, and that was a big pill for a founder to swallow, right? When you've been working on something for a long period of time and realizing that you kind of needed to go in a different direction. And so it was kind of interesting, but it's been amazing, being on the journey with you. And I'm just happy to be here talking to you about what all you got going on with Novateus and what you do, man. So,
I think they call those pivots in the startup world.
Yeah.
And if you found a startup, you'll probably make quite a few of them. I like to think they're small in nature, micro pivots, but they happen. You have to listen and you have to adjust, and you have to make sometimes very hard decisions. And you did, and I mean, hopefully, I think you're better off for it. Hopefully, you think the same way. Time will tell, but it feels like we're on the right path when it comes to Falaya and where we're focused. So
yeah.
But I didn't start off as a software developer.
Yeah, kind of tell us where you started it.
I started off as a mortgage broker in New Orleans after college. I graduated from LSU and moved to New Orleans and went to work for a mortgage company, and decided that I liked the mortgage industry enough to stick with it, but didn't like having a boss looking over my shoulder, or going from 0 to 0 every month. It was very stressful and not something that I enjoyed. So went out on my own in 2003, founded my own brokerage, and created what I'd say was a unique model at the time, based on almost the Remax model, where the lion's share of the monies, the commissions, went to the loan officer, and the company took a small portion of it, where at the time most mortgage companies were doing 50-50 splits, or taking even more, 60 or 70% in some cases. And they had smaller offices with fewer loan officers. So this model required that we scale up and go and try to attract the best loan officers and get as many of them as we could. And these guys were the ones that were self-sufficient. They had established themselves in the marketplace. They had a pipeline of deals, and we were going to provide the services, the back office services, to help them get their loans through the pipeline. So they would bring in the deals, we would process the loans, collect all the paperwork, and at the end of the day, pay them the majority of the commissions. In order to execute on that model, we had to be really efficient. We had to have a lot of processes in place and a lot of automation in place. And just like real estate, the mortgage industry is very paper intensive. So, and this is in 2003, where it was fax machines and FedEx and very paper based. So started working with a local developer to try to automate some of those paper intensive processes, and at the end of the day, ended up with what is called a loan origination software. Coin, that's the category of software that we were developing. So, and with that, it's about managing all the application data, being able to generate the disclosures, the loan application, all of the closing documents. Ultimately, as electronic signatures became more mainstream, we incorporated that into the solution. And then a big chunk of it was around document management and task management, workflows. So what do you need to collect? When do you need to collect it? And being able to manage what you are collecting. And decided that I wanted to focus on software versus running a mortgage brokerage. I really fell in love with software development. I loved what I would say is the design phase. That's really what I did on a day-to-day basis was focus on the interfaces and how things fit together. To me, that was very challenging and very satisfying to be able to solve these, what you'd call a puzzle, which is a software application. It's a big puzzle. You're putting things together and making sure that you have a good flow and people understand the application and what the ultimate outcomes are supposed to be for the application. So that was my focus, and decided to commercialize that software in 2008. It's called Atlos, Automated Tracking Loan Origination Software. Great name.
I didn't realize that's what it stood for.
I didn't know
what
it had LOS in it. That's what you call loan origination software.
All right.
And through the A and the T in front of it.
Ah, gotcha.
Yeah, I got the .com and everything was great. So
how much did that cost you, the .com?
Man, this was in 2006 or 7. You could get almost any .com. It was
really
way early on that kind of stuff. So I wish I could go back to that time and buy some great domain names like Uber.
Yeah, right. No doubt. Right.
Anyway, so 2008 moved into the tech park and started licensing the software, and it sold the mortgage company to my partner at the time. He focused on that, and I focused on trying to build a SaaS business. And I thought it would be as easy as what I'd done with the mortgage brokerage, and it was totally different. I was a mortgage brokerage as a service company, and a SaaS business is just totally different model, different sales approach, everything. But fumbled and bumbled my way through it for, it was probably 2008, and then sold it in 2016. So pretty long time trying to figure things out. And we had some wins and a lot of losses, but I'd say the losses were great experiences. Learn mainly what not to do. If I could go back in time, my biggest mistake was not hiring a professional to do the interfaces. I knew I could go in and architect it. They call it information architecture. So I knew how to organize stuff. But as far as the not just the design, but the usability, and now they've got a position for that, user experience designers. And sometimes a UI designer and a UX designer are one person, one and the same, but user experience is often different than the actual design, the graphical representations. UX is all about the journey, the flow through the software, touch points, how you're trying to get someone from point A to point B, or through the entire application based on what your primary feature sets are. So I would have hired somebody, a professional or somebody to say, hey, focus on your core features and make it really simple for people to figure out. We had, I would say, a lot of success in getting attention. Mm-hmm. Like, it was easy to market to mortgage brokers. It was easy to find them, get all their contact information.
Oh, yeah, they're all
back then, email marketing worked great. So I would just email market to a database of 250,000 potential prospects. And I think within like the first few months, signed up 100 people, 100 different companies. And I was doing everything. I was coming up with the marketing campaigns, doing the sales demos, And man, I was batting like, not 1,000%, but my demos, I had them down. I could show people the benefits of managing everything digitally, and was getting good feedback on things that they liked. I should have focused in on the things that people really needed at the time, which was they wanted to be able to manage their what they call conditions, all the documents that you collect, when you collect them, who needs to collect them, what the status was on that. If I could go back, that would be the thing that I focused on, and not all this other stuff. I tried to put as much emphasis on the document generation and electronic signatures, which they were not even accepted at the time. HUD didn't even accept electronic signatures until like 2013. So it was completely premature. And that, you don't want to be too early to market with a feature. It just, you won't get any adoption. And I got no adoption on that. It was just a lot of stuff that was in the software that was distracting. And that was probably the downfall of the software, was that it was too much. It was bloated and too many distractions, and people couldn't figure out how to use it and what was important in it. And that's where a good designer and someone who knows user experience would have said, hey, this is UX designers. They do a lot of research, and they're running tests, A/B testing, and trying to figure out like what are people really interested in, and how do we solve those problems, and how do we make those the focal points. And a good designer will go in and make it look nice, and try to minimize the number of clicks and make things intuitive, like easy to find, easy to figure out. With my software, you needed a damn instruction manual. You probably had to read it like 3 or 4 times just to remember how to do things. And I want to kick myself for not identifying that quicker. But that is like what drives me today. When I talk to a new prospect, that is what consumes me, is how do we make things look nice, and how do we incorporate a great user experience. And that's before we ever write the first line of code. And this gets into kind of the process that we take, but it's all about requirements analysis, making sure you understand the requirements before you do any designing. Then you get into the information architecture and creating site maps, and then you create your wireframes and your visual designs, high fidelity designs, and ultimately a prototype before you do any coding. And those are things that I think are very important. Sometimes we work with people that have an existing product or have some designs that were already created for them, and they just need us to develop. But to go straight from an idea to development is not feasible, and it's often a losing scenario. You just
for sure. I mean, here's the way I look at that is development. Development's not cheap either, right?
No,
it's
that's 85% or 90% of your cost.
It's not a cheap endeavor, right? So the thing is, you have to be efficient with your resources, and even when you're efficient with your resources, you're probably going to make some mistakes along the way. But I can tell you what, if you don't have a design or a exact plan of what needs to happen, you're going to have a lot of rework and a lot of things that you're going to have to redo. And from my experience, even the smallest rework ends up causing ripple effects. And, the way I look at UX UI is that's basically your drawings or your architectural drawings for a building, much like a building. And if you don't have those, the builder doesn't know how to build the building. And and it's the fact. And then if the builder doesn't know what he's doing, guess what he's going to do? He's going to walk around for a little bit. He's going to waste time, and he's going to waste resources. And
not efficient, and you're gonna have reworks. That's exactly right. If you're going to build, let's say, a $500,000 house, your plans, you go to an architect, and those plans may only be 5% of the total cost or less, but you would never start building that $500,000 house before you first went to an architect and had everything detailed in your plans. You would never do that. And then you take your plans, and then the builder goes off of those plans, and you have a house where you may have some small changes along the way, but when you finalize those plans, that's what you would expect when your house is finished.
And what I would say there is like your base plans, right? So your 3-bedroom, 2-bath house, right? Well, you had some kids, and now you got to do an addition, right? And you add on addition, you go back to the architect, you give him $5,000, have him do the drawings, then you bring it to the builder to do your master suite, right? So you have to build an app in the base, and then you start adding on to it with designs and other things. But you've got to keep that same plan all the way through to keep it congruent. Number one, to make it efficient. Number two, to keep the design the same, right?
Yep.
And keep all the stuff the same. Because what I can say from my experience is if you don't do that, things start to go off the rails, and they go off the rails quickly if you don't keep your hand on the steering wheel.
Yeah, and one of the great things about the design phase, you had mentioned it's significantly cheaper to design versus development. One of the things we try to do is think about the big picture. What does it all look like? Whether we're going to develop it in the first phase, second phase, let's create these versions of the software, phases of the software, where phase 1 will incorporate these core features, phase 2, some other features on down the line. And if we're successful with phase 1, then maybe we do everything from phase 2, maybe we don't. Maybe we shuffle some things around and reorganize the priorities. But to be able to know what the big picture looks like is so helpful to the overall success of the project. And that way you don't try to come up with a feature after you've built your app that doesn't fit with the overall architecture of your solution. So, and you can design those, and then you can decide when you develop those things. You don't have to develop everything that you design, but to have it all designed helps you with a roadmap and helps you to, even when you're going and pitching investors, you can talk about what the future looks like, and you're not only talking about it, but people are visual, especially non-technical people. It really helps to be able to see it, and that's the way I've always tried to pitch things, whether it's to a customer or to an investor. I've tried to pitch around designs, images of what it will actually look like, and it's always, I think, helped me to convey a message. So I use designs not just for development, but to try to sell.
I mean, that's absolutely the case. I would say one of the biggest things for early founders, I would say my advice would be, is to, engage someone like Randall or a UX UI designer, get you some design so you kind of understand the roadmap of what you're doing. And then you can use these screens in a deck and have a presentation, and you can go raise funds off of that. So for a small investment of UX UI, you can start to truly raise funds or get people to join your team or to get buzz around your idea.
Yep.
And also bring those designs to actual developers and have them bid out the designs. And so you kind of know how much you're in for, how much money it's going to take to get to where you want to be, and how much time it might take.
You
right?
Take those plans that your architect put together for you, and you go bid it out with 3 or 4 builders.
That's right.
And get your quotes, do your due diligence there too. And we're kind of in the golden age of design, where you've got these great tools like Figma. We use Figma on a daily basis. And not only do you create the graphical representations of your interfaces, but you can build non-functional prototypes where the experience would be much like if it was on your phone or on your desktop. You can click through the application and see these flows, these workflows that are built into the prototype. And it's really easy to do those demonstrations if you are in front of an investor or a customer. Going through that and showing it in that way really helps them to understand what it's going to look like and the problems that you're going to solve with the application. That's going back, I think, understanding the features and the problems are an important part of that design phase too. That's one of the first things me as a designer, that's the first thing I want to know is what are we building, who are we building it for, what problems are we solving, and then get into other things like use cases and user personas, things like that. But I'd say those three things are absolutely critical in any software project. So,
yeah, I mean, design is the key, in my opinion. I think it all just starts there. Obviously, it's only the beginning of software development, and there's a lot that goes into it. But I'd say if you start out, garbage in, garbage out, right? If you got bad designs and bad plans, you're probably going to have a bad website, right? And so you got to start with that initial phase of the design.
And I don't think, I think today most people start there. 10 years ago, I'd say no, that, they'd get a developer to do the, not necessarily even design, just, hey, let's go ahead straight in and start doing the front end development.
Just put controls in there.
Yeah.
Willy nilly.
Yeah. When I was doing it, we were taking the actual controls and just placing them.
Right. Exactly.
There was really no custom design applied to any of those controls. We were not building any custom controls. We were not theming the controls. It was strictly just where do these controls go? Where are we laying things out? Whether it's a panel or some type of form field, content blocks. It was me placing things, and it was just too much stuff in that initial application. Way too much stuff.
Yeah, and I do think simplicity is what people want. They want to go through flows really seamlessly. They don't want to have to re-enter information twice. They want it to be smooth and easy to use. And those are key things that you've got to have, right?
Yeah, it kind of goes back to the strategy. Like, I should have focused on one or two things that people needed at the time. And I'm not saying that document generation and electronic signatures are not a huge part of what the same users that were using this software would do on a daily basis, but they didn't need it. They had other softwares doing it, or it wasn't something that was even applicable, like electronic signatures. You couldn't use them, so it was just a waste of space. And they were using other softwares to generate the documents and collect the data, but they were using our software to manage the document intake, and that should have consumed me. That should have been all that I focused on, and creating probably tight integrations with some of these other systems like Calyx and Encompass that dominated the market. Instead of trying to go head to head with them, tie into what they're doing, have a really seamless integration. One of those guys could have come along and bought me because it was a good fit for their solution, and they were not doing it at the time. Document management and online document management was not even a thing. Like, this software was one of the first mortgage specific platforms that was web-based, and people were quickly following. There were other companies that popped up shortly thereafter, but in 2005, when I started, it was all desktop applications, and really the infancy of web applications. So too early, man. Good lesson to learn. You don't get awards for being too early on something.
Well, I can tell you, I mean, your experience with the mortgage software, coupled with us, who's in the real estate space, has quite honestly made it a good fit for Falaya and Novateus to come together and build this stuff together. And really, the future of Falaya is handling the transaction from list to close, right? That's why we have. I mean,
it's real estate sales, and financing is oftentimes a big part of that. You and I, whether we built software or not, could have easily worked together, me as a loan officer, you as a real estate agent, on purchase transactions. So there's obvious synergies and connectivity there. And the workflows are very similar. Like, what you do and what I do, it's almost identical. We call things, we may term things a little different, but we live in that same world where the transaction from start to finish there's a lot of the same processes involved. So
it is. It's the same thing. I mean, ultimately, we have the inspection. You're not involved in the inspection, but we move through the same thing with the appraisal process and the closing process. It's all. It's no money, no deal. You don't have any money, you got no deal, right? Where's the money coming from? It's coming from the mortgage broker. So at the end of the day, the agent or the real estate brokerage and the mortgage company are hand in hand trying to close a deal together. And so the marriage of you knowing that process and understanding what it takes, and us building out the flows of people through the listing to close, which is what I think people that have done this real estate software have not focused on, and why no other software has worked and no one has fixed the problem. It's because everybody wants to list your house, right? Everybody in the world wants to send you a sign and say good luck, but no one's really handling the transaction from list to close.
Exactly.
And I think that's the hardest part, and that's where you add a lot of value, because you kind of know what I'm talking about. I don't have to 100% explain it to you when we're doing designs or UX UI. You kind of get it, right?
Yeah, but think about your average borrower or your average seller or buyer. They don't know what's going on behind the scenes.
They have no idea.
But the flow is very similar. Like, you have a purchase agreement, we have a loan application. I collect data and I input it and fill that application, and they sign it. You do the same thing with the purchase agreement. Then you generate disclosures and listing agreements and all kinds of documents. We do the same thing. We've got 50 different disclosures that we generate that need to be signed. Then you're collecting documentation from third parties. We're doing the same thing. We're collecting appraisals and title. You're collecting a lot of the same documents that we're collecting in order to get to a closing, where you generate a whole nother set of documents, and there's a transaction, there's exchange of funds. And those workflows, those processes are almost a mirror image of one another. Just we're oftentimes we're working in parallel, doing a lot of the same stuff.
Oh, it's definitely in parallel.
What you said about really simplifying that and making it easy for the buyers and the sellers to be able to do that themselves is novel. It's not being done today. All the technology is in the hands of the real estate agents, and with Falaya, there is no agent almost most of the time.
Right.
So you have to take that same technology that agents use on a daily basis to make their jobs easier, and build it out for buyers and sellers, and even make it more simple than that, because it's probably the only transaction they're going to do that year, maybe in 3 or 4 years. Whereas you have time on your side where you can learn a technology and master it. A buyer or seller, they may use it one time and that's it. So they need to be able to figure it out quick. It can't be something, again, that requires a user manual.
No, that is why we have built it out the way we have, with easy form fills, kind of like TurboTax, where you fill out the purchase price, it fills the legal document, and you digitally sign it, right? It makes it palpable. And when you receive the offer, you can easily see the person's name, the price, all the stuff, before you have to actually go into the legal document, right? So that flow of it makes it easier and more palpable. And we try to, we're going to continually try to innovate that, because you get feedback from users. And ultimately, that's the cycle of software development is iterating off of feedback from users after they've been using it. And how
most consumers, they're indifferent. They just want a really frictionless experience. But when you start to get feedback from people saying, oh man, this was better than I thought, that's powerful. It tells you, it should tell you, those are signals you look for, that you're onto something and you're headed in the right direction. And at the end of the day, that's what you want. You want to provide a powerful technology platform that guides buyers and sellers along this journey and makes it really easy for them. Not something that they have to spend a lot of time trying to figure out. Does a lot of the work for them, and that's what you're doing. And not only are you providing a valuable service that saves people tons of money by eliminating a lot of the commissions they pay, but you're building at the same time this platform, this technology that that holds a ton of value, and that's probably one of my favorite things, and why I want to build my own SaaS platforms is there's so much value not only in the services, but oftentimes in the technologies that you're developing. So
So
if you ever exit, which we hope you do, there'll be value in your IP, your technology. There'll be value in your services and in this network that you've established, this branding that you've created. It's very difficult to do, but you're doing it.
Yeah, it's definitely not easy to get something like this off the ground. The hardest part for us is engaging sellers, right? So anybody watching this, like, let people know about it, know that we exist, because people don't buy and sell properties but every 6 years, right? So it's not one of these things that you make monthly, so the customer acquisition, and if we figure out how to truly get the word out there, and that's what this podcast is about, and that's what some of the landing pages and ads are doing, and once we figure that out, it's off to the races.
And it's not like you say sellers and buyers, they transact once every 6 years. You and I have had this conversation, but how do we add additional value for those parties that you've already done this service for? How can you? Right. And there are ways to monetize that too. And I think once you start to crack the code on that and add these additional revenue sources, you'll have a very powerful business.
Yeah, that's the important part about handling someone from list to close, is that people just make so many purchase decisions between the listing
just
of
added financing is a part of it, or insurance,
movers, cable, alarm companies.
But first, you got to get the transactions, and then you control the transactions, and there's all these different opportunities.
There really are.
Like, remember when Facebook had no
revenue?
They didn't even have a model.
They had a bunch of users.
They knew that, hey, we think we're going to make money off of ads, but they didn't really know exactly how, and they were not doing it. It took them forever to do it, but they knew that as they started to capture market share and bring on these users, they knew that they were going to figure out ways to monetize it. That's the same for you. That's the same for any SaaS business. You need to have some ideas on how we're going to make money, or do people want to pay for what we've got? But I think it's pretty clear that you have a service that people are going to pay for. And the other opportunities you'll start to figure out as you begin to grow. And that holds true for lots of different technology companies. So,
yeah. Well, so obviously with Novateus, right, you're doing software development for other people and UX UI designs. And so, a lot of that is, talking to founders or business owners and, listening to their ideas and, having discovery calls and then bidding out the process. When you're doing that initial call with a founder or a business owner and they're telling you their ideas, kind of what is your, how do you absorb the information they're saying, and what are kind of like your top takeaways or advice you give them, going into a software bidding situation, or, them getting into your services?
That's, I'm glad you brought that up, and it'll help me to come full circle.
Yeah.
So after Atlas 2016, I was able to exit that company. It was a golden parachute, maybe a soft landing. It was certainly not a crash and burn or a glorious exit. It gave me enough time to try to figure out what I wanted to do next, and it made sense. I had already established a network of developers and designers, and had learned a lot about building up my own SaaS business, and wanted to apply that knowledge and create a service out of it. And partnered up with Sean, my CTO of Atlas. He and I founded Novateus, and that same year we picked up our first project. It was for a good friend of mine who had a trucking company and had developed an internal logistics an order management solution for himself. A lot of the same things that you and I talked about. He wanted to try to automate all these manual, paper-intensive processes, get rid of text messages and emails, and make it a lot more efficient. And he built this platform and had other trucking companies who were interested in using it, and created a SaaS business out of it. So he had the trucking company and the software business, and started licensing it, and had real success. It was at the time crazy to me that he had such success, yet his solution was not even created to be a SaaS platform. It was what's termed a single tenant application. So every person he brought on, he had to create another instance of that software and that database, and he was managing probably managing like 11 different web applications for 11 different customers. So that was one of the first things. That was his big challenge, which got him and I talking, was, hey, I've got this software and I need to make it a true multi-tenant solution. And then he had some other features that his dev team had tried to build, and it didn't go well. There were a lot of things that were really not done well in the application. The technology that they used was a technology that was very niche. It was built by them, the framework. Like today we'd use Angular, and they built their own framework, and it was so buggy. So we scrapped all of that, completely overhauled the layout, and added some new features around tracking, like Uber, GPS tracking, and geofences for automating statuses of the order. So we added some new functionality. We made it a multi-tenant solution, and created a new design around that application. And that was another one that I designed. And again, if I could go back, I would have completely handed that. We had another designer that was helping, but I would have just said, hey, these are the features, and let a good quality designer go and do all the design work and provide feedback as designs were created. But it was another great project. Learned a lot, and he was able to have a successful exit. So that was fun to go through that whole process. And we're still doing work for the owner of that project. To answer your question, for us, it all starts with that analysis phase. Somebody comes with an idea, or maybe they have their requirements already listed out in a document, and they describe what each one of those requirements are. I look at a requirement as a feature or a module being a set of features, and I want to document that. I want to make sure I understand what each thing is, what it means, and there's other research that I'm doing along the way. I want to learn about the company and that industry. Like if it's logistics, I want to at least a high level understand what that means, what they're doing, who are the parties involved. I want to look at the competition, not just the companies. I want to look at similar solutions that may exist today, to even further learn what this industry is doing to try to automate processes, and look for gaps. So do a gap analysis, like what's missing, where can we make improvements in current technologies that are out there, where can we add more value to things that are there, but maybe there's some missing features and functions. So that's part of the analysis phase. Make sure that we have a proper requirements document, which is going to spell out every module, every feature. Once that's done, we move into the design phase, where it's the creation of components. Components are all your controls, your style guides, typography, icons, illustrations. That's everything that you're going to use to start building your screens. And if you do that, if you build a proper components library, you're able to speed up your design phase, because you make things reusable. You're not creating one-to-one controls for every screen. You're able to reuse those components, and you're able to make global changes to those components. If you need to make a small change to one of your components, it can propagate those changes to every screen that has that component linked to it. So we would make a proper components library, make sure we understand and incorporate all the branding into that style guide, and then start creating the screens, the layouts, where things are going to sit on the page, where your navigation, top level navigation, like your primary nav bar, your secondary navigations, tab controls, form fields, everything. We build those pages out. Starts off as a wireframe. We'd call that a low fidelity design. It doesn't have color oftentimes. It doesn't have any of the styling. It's just the placement, where things are, and what pages are going to be incorporated into the application. Then we start to work on high fidelity designs. Sometimes they're happening kind of in conjunction with one another. Like I'll say, hey, this is the way things are laid out. This is the wireframe. You say, yeah, that looks good. We'll move right into creating the actual, the way the page is going to look when it's developed. And then at the end of the day, once all of those screens are completed, we create a prototype so that you can actually experience what it would be like with it, either on a phone or on a desktop or laptop. Those clicks, those interactions, everything. It's a non-functional prototype. And we can start developing towards the tail end. If, that's one of the things along the way we're learning too, is we're trying to find out what the timeline is. Sometimes it's a very short window of time. Right. So we have to get through that design phase as quickly as possible and know at least enough to start developing.
Right.
Ideally, we'd finish the design phase and then provide a quote on what development's going to take. And again, you could take those designs to any dev shop, and they should be able to give you, if it's done well, they should be able to give you a fixed price quote on developing what has been designed. And it's not an exact science, but you'll be much closer. I'm comfortable giving somebody a fixed price quote on a new project, as long as there's proper designs created. I don't love it because it's not an exact science, and I feel like sometimes it stifles those pivots that you have to make when you're building a new. Everybody thinks of a pivot as a bad thing. I think if you're doing small pivots as micro pivots, it's a good thing. You're iterating, and usually those come from getting feedback, whether it's a stakeholder, an investor, or even an initial customer doing beta. They're going to be early adopters of your software. They're going to give you some really critical feedback, and when you get that feedback, you need to be able to process it in the right way and make the proper changes when needed. Sometimes you'll get feedback that you don't want to act on. So You need to be able to differentiate between feedback, and that ultimately falls on the founder. Somebody like you're probably getting feedback all the time, some good, some bad, some you're going to act on, some you're not. It's all about how do you process that feedback, and then how do you prioritize the things you want to take action on. And it's something that you learn from being a founder, and it's you get better and better at it as you're doing it, but it's almost, there's no course, nothing you can do where you walk right into it as a professional. It's something that you learn through experience of being a founder. But that's our process. And I didn't talk much about development, but there's a whole nother process that goes into development once you finish designs and you begin to plan out the project and take those designs and convert them to actionable tasks and assign them to dev resources, and how you manage that whole process, the development phase. We use Jira for managing those projects, and try to be as agile as possible. Sometimes it's not possible with a brand new project. like you're doing sprints, you're practicing what I call agile methodology. If you were just starting, you probably wouldn't do that. You'd probably say we're gonna take more of a waterfall approach. These are the things we want to build. We have to have it done, and we can't say that we're going to quit on something after a sprint. You've got to finish things out, and oftentimes you don't know exactly how long it's going to take to do that, and you're making these small tweaks and pivots along the way. So being flexible, that's important when you get into that dev phase. But as far as design phase, that's our process, and it's when I've talked to other companies that do what we do, that's typically what they do also. So, but that design phase is critical. Like you said, you wouldn't go build a house without going to an architect and getting your designs detailed and finalized before doing anything. No foundations, no framing, nothing. You would have your designs. You would have a builder give you a timeline and a plan around that and a cost, and then you go. So I look at software. I try to explain software the same way because it's easy for people to understand that. So
yeah, I mean, that's a lot. Obviously development, is a whole piece, and so is design. I mean, there's a lot of moving parts there. You did talk about feedback. It's interesting as a founder, you really do have to learn how to listen to a lot of different people, taking a lot of information, whether that's from investors, users, development team, employees like Jacob. I mean, everybody's coming at you to tell you what you should probably do and how you should probably do it. And I would say the hardest thing is to be able to digest that and act. I think you really have to trust your gut.
Yep.
Like I've learned really quickly that that I need to do what I need to do, and I need to trust my gut. At some level, I need to listen, absorb the information, and then make my decision. And you don't want to get analysis paralysis in this position, but at the same time, you want to absorb what you're being told, right?
I think for me, it's quick for me to, I'm like you said, I'm these signals, I'm looking for them. And that's step one is you have to be looking for them. Like I see some founders that are just not looking for the signals, and they keep doing the same things over and over until there's time runs out. They can't keep doing it anymore.
Yeah.
So you got to look for those signals. You got to learn how to process those signals and prioritize what's important, what's not. But as you get better and better at it, it's, you know pretty quickly. Like you see something like, holy shit, man, how did I miss that? Or hell no, that's
yeah. I would say,
and sometimes something will come up where I'm indifferent. I don't know necessarily right then and there, but I think those are fewer and far between now. So
for me, it's like now at this stage, it's like I need to act faster. I need to absorb information. I need to act, right? Like Jacob and I earlier had a conversation about what we're going to do in 2023, what his goals are, what my goals are over lunch really quickly, right? And what it is to take action, right? Go after investors, go after builders, real estate investors to get them on our platform, all these things that we're going to do to take those actions and actually execute on them. As far as development goes, right, you've got to also, like what we did today at 9:30 on the UX UI call, I went over the photo uploader twice. You've got to redo UX UI multiple times before you push it to dev. In my opinion, I think that's one of the biggest things that I've learned is to actually do something, step away from it, come back to it, because you will miss the stupidest thing that you didn't realize missed, and you have to fix it. Wait, we never did the pop out for the notes. We need why is there no call to action on this? And it's like
sometimes the developer will call it out. And
yeah.
Hey, how do we do this or
the
that?
developer will call it out.
You don't want it to get to that point.
You don't want it to get to that point.
You don't want a developer having to do any of the creative, having to think through any workflows. Mm-hmm. Developers are very analytical people, and designers are very, I would say, creative people. And usually that's not the same person. I've yet to see a developer that's also just a great designer, and I've yet to see a designer that is a great developer. I feel like those are two completely different types of people, and I see people building software that think that they can get that one person and they're going to do everything, and that I've worked with a lot of designers and a lot of developers, and I've yet to see one person that I would say could do either or, and they'd be an amazing.
You kind of almost don't want them to. The reason why I say that is because you want the two people to be disconnected, right? You don't want them thinking about how they're going to line up the code with the design. You want the design to come from the user experience, and then them figure out how they're going to line up the code. And sometimes those things can, cloud their judgment on how to lay things out or to do things. When in actuality, it's not developing it. You don't really want to develop for the code. I mean, you do, but you want the design for the user to feel flawless, right? And so it's a mirroring of the two. And so I think having those two people apart is more beneficial. Obviously, resources and dollars.
A good designer needs to understand what's in the realm of possibility, but
right
today, we are truly in the golden age where you have so much freedom to be able to create designs that can be developed relatively easy. Now, you do get into that time and cost where if you have to build something completely custom, a custom control, is it worth it? But I couldn't agree with you more. Like, let a designer come in and with a fresh set of eyes and think about things from a human's perspective.
I would agree.
Not saying, we always try to take a human-centered approach where
I would agree.
Where we try to think like a person. Not in developers. Again, they're very analytical people, and I don't think that most people that use software think like a developer.
They don't. I
think designers can put themselves in the shoes of someone who's going to actually use the software, and somebody who's not necessarily going to live in the software. There may not be a power user. When you're building enterprise software where someone's using it every day,
there's a difference. Yeah,
there's a difference. When you're building something that's more consumer focused, where your consumers may not use your software that frequently, you really have to try to think just like those users, and how are they going to be able to successfully interact with your software. And
that brings me to a point that I wanted to bring up, which is, what I hear a lot from founders or people that are doing startups like me is like mobile first or web first, or should I develop this or develop that, because they have to figure out the resources and what they allocate towards. At Falaya, we obviously went web at first, right? And we focused on that because we thought that's where the majority of users would want to sit down and input their listing. And remember, then we had to go to we quickly realized that we needed mobile responsive, web-based. Then we went in. Now we're into the mobile app phase where we went that direction, right?
Think about how much has changed in the last 4 years with just the ability to create good mobile apps. I mean, mobile is catching up, or has caught up, or maybe even surpassed web. But I would say that it wasn't a wrong decision to focus on the web application first. Is mobile at the time, it wasn't new, but building a quality mobile app was not an easy thing with the technologies that were available at the time. Today we're using Flutter.
That's where we're at with this one.
Great technology. You can you don't have to manage different code bases. Right. You can have a single code base with your native codes. It's much easier you don't need as many resources. It's just a lot more practical. And I think you found that your users, your customers wanted to interact on mobile as much or more. I don't know if it's as much. Maybe
So here's my thought on it, right? Is that everybody has to market and sell their app or their website to the public. Yes or no? Yes. Right?
yes.
Right? How do you market a product to the public? Right? It's really hard in the App Store right now, from the way that it's developed in the App Store, to truly market a mobile app, purely mobile app, and have as much success as far as SEO, website traffic, other things that can happen, and ads that can be run. It's extremely hard to capture those users at scale. You can do it, don't get me wrong, and there's people that are doing it.
Well, I think
but it's really clouded. It's really clouded. And for my use case,
you got to think about your use case.
My use case for sure, but I would say more people than they think, more founders than they think are going mobile first, when in actuality they need to be straddling the line because they need to capture their users and migrate them to mobile. That is what we are doing. We are now in 2023 going to launch this Flutter app, and it is going to control the user from list to closing on that mobile application. And we will be purely mobile at that point once you list, right? Because reality is everybody's walking around with the cell phone in their pocket.
But you
gotta acquire. But you have to acquire the customer first. And if you can't acquire the customer, then there's no freaking point of having the mobile app.
I still say that discovery, like people are discovering you through web, through search,
for sure,
and they're going to land on your website, and then from there, they can decide do they want to interact on your web application, or they want to download the mobile app, or maybe it's a combination of the two. I think for your use case, you need both. You have to have both. I don't think you could have been just mobile.
No way. And I would say most founders and startups need to realize that. I think there's just a glorification of that mobile first. It sounds like
I'm built today.
You know what I mean? It sounds fancy. It sounds like you know what you're talking about. But the reality is, what does your customer acquisition funnel look like? Are you a social network where people are going to share and be on it? Then yes. All you need, you may only need
it depends so much on what type of software you're building and who are your users. If I'm building an enterprise application, it's going to be totally different than a consumer focused application. We're building an enterprise application now where it's a web application. There is no mobile component, and if there is a mobile component, it's going to be a small standalone mobile application that's used by one specific user to perform a specific function at the site where they're doing their job. It's not going to consume all of the features from the web application. And I think that's, step one is you need to figure that out. Like, how am I going to, what is the solution problem I'm solving, and how am I going to deliver that to the people that want it? Do people want it? Are they willing to pay for it, or however you're planning on monetizing it? And if all those, you check those boxes, then you need to figure out how you're going to deliver these solutions to them, and that requires some analysis. Sometimes it is mobile first. Sometimes it's a web application.
Yeah, I'm not.
Sometimes it's both. Sometimes
it could be
the mobile app doesn't have all the same features as the web app. So these are all things that you do during that requirements and analysis phase. You're figuring that out. What platforms are you building on, and you're defining those use cases. So.
And you got to talk to your customers to understand what their pain points are, what they're having issues with, and how they can solve that, right? And what do you need too as a company? Like, what are your requirements? Like, for us to list a property, we need a listing agreement. Yeah. We need the property disclosure document. We need the agency and the lead-based paint document. We need your signature on it. Like
the best projects that we work on are founded by founders that have intimate knowledge of a domain and industry, like you. Like you were not a software technologist. You were a real estate broker,
right?
And you understood. You'd been in that space and sat on all sides of the transactions. You'd been a buyer. You'd been a seller. You'd been an agent. You knew you knew those personas really well, and you knew the technologies that existed, what each party had access to, and you saw the gaps, you saw the problems. Those are the best applications and the most satisfying that we work on. I can look at the things that we've worked on, and there's things that I don't even understand that well, not well enough to go back and say, man, I should have founded that application. I couldn't have. I don't have the domain expertise. I wouldn't have known enough to build a real valuable solution. I can't build things for lawyers. I can't build things for doctors without having those stakeholders involved in the project.
You definitely have to have
I would tell any founder, if you're building a solution, hopefully you're building for something that you really understand well, and you understand where the pain points are and how to solve them. There are some successes you see where it's just a technology company, and they're like, we want to go build this app. We think it's in a good space, and they've done the research and they go and build it and launch it. But the best ones that I've seen are all built by founders, and usually non-technical founders that really understand that domain, that space really well, and know what's there today and how to solve a lot of problems, make people's lives better. That's what we're doing.
Yep. Well, that's the goal. So, obviously, we're here in the tech park. You've been in this space since 2007, was it, or whatever, 8?
First time 08, and then they kicked me out.
They
kicked me out in 2013, and then I came back for a second round.
Cool.
I don't know if they're going to boot me out anytime soon.
I don't think so.
We'll go do our own thing.
That's what I'm bringing it to is like, we're trying to create something cool here at Falaya, right? For real estate. We're also trying to highlight software companies and other business owners in Baton Rouge that are doing cool stuff. What do you see? What do you think Baton Rouge could do, or what do you think the tech space in Baton Rouge could do better and push us forward and make Baton Rouge, on the map of technology companies in the South?
Yeah, it's a uphill battle. The tech park is doing a good job and trying to push this ecosystem forward. It's just a challenge. Like, you need resources, you need access to capital, you need not only dev resources and design resources. You need people that can help you you need marketing and sales.
God, yeah.
I mean, those are, to me, the cornerstones of any company, not just a software company. You got to have marketing and sales, and you got to have people that can execute that. For a software company, you got to have good DevOps, good designers. You got to have access to capital often. You can bootstrap companies, and I'd say most of the people in Baton Rouge, that's what they have to do, because there's just not a lot of access to capital. So those things will hopefully continue to grow and expand. I think it's a chicken and egg thing. You got to have, for a company to be successful here, they've got to have access to capital. They've got to have access to funding in order to be able to keep people the resources here instead of leaving to go find work elsewhere. So I think it really starts with there's got to be a place like this that can support entrepreneurs and startups, but more importantly, there's got to be an expansion of access to capital. People that can really analyze, and it's hard. Like, it's hard to get capital anywhere now. Like VC and angel, it's brutal right now in the startup space. But it's almost non-existent here. I mean, you hear about a few fundings, but I think that needs to grow and expand, and I think the resources, the talent may not necessarily follow it, but it'll be easier to keep people here you've got good young people that are learning development, learning design, and probably leaving.
Yeah, I mean
Unfortunately.
that's the thing is that you've got to be able to retain the talent. I would say we need some big successes, right? Like we need a home run. We need someone like Falaya to have a huge exit or build out a team of 20 or 30 people. And then there'd be like one or two other companies that start to do that. You need to have one or we just had a huge success in Mastery Prep. So we need
And not only that, like keep that company here. So when Zillow comes and either invests or buy you, part of the deal hopefully would be to have that operations here in Baton Rouge and expand it significantly. There's no reason we can't be successful here.
I would agree.
Especially with a technology startup where everything's remote now and everything's online. You can run this business, what you're doing from here, and you can provide your services anywhere. Especially,
I would agree,
considering that you're primarily a technology company. It's not there's human involvement, but for your model, it's the buyers and sellers doing the heavy lifting, and you're just guiding them along the way with your software, and that can work anywhere. So, I don't know.
There needs to be like to your point. I think Baton Rouge does need access to capital, right? They need companies to stick around, and they need resources pushed towards it. Whether that's the government get behind it with tax benefits, pushing more incentives, maybe more incentives for LSU students to stick around. I mean, to retain the talent, right?
What's crazy is Louisiana has great incentive programs. I used to sit on LED's advisory board, and that was one of the. I mean, this was years ago, 5 years ago. Man, you've got all these great programs, and nobody understands them and knows about them. Like, market that crap.
Right.
Not crap, but market that shit.
Yeah.
Make people aware of all these great things that are available and how it actually works. Don't make startups go read a novel and hire a lawyer to understand how the program works.
Well,
and that's the way it is.
I think that's the big part of it is that, the amount of knowledge it takes to do some of this stuff and some of the resources and grants there are and the angel investor. I mean, there's so many programs out there and tax benefits out there, but I've taken phone calls with people that do that for a living and had to like digest what all I could do and not do. And it's a deal, right? It's not so simple, right?
When I did it, and I've done all of them, just about. I did digital interactive media, which I don't even think is a thing anymore. I did the R&D tax credit. I did the angel investor tax credit. And the easiest one was the angel investor tax credit, but all the other ones required a CPA and took a ton of time and cost a lot of money. And yes, it was a tangible benefit, but it wasn't easy. And I would think that the average small startup doesn't have time to invest in that.
I would agree.
That whole learning curve.
It's
and
a lot.
Finding the right people to actually get it done for you.
The only time it comes around is when the money comes around. So in other words, it's helping when money comes. It's helping the money come. The reason why those things are in place is to help funders get a benefit when they invest at some level. Because,
angel investor, yeah.
You know what I mean?
R&D is a straight up tax credit on your expenses.
It is, but it's also a tax credit on the money that the investor invested. So they're getting a kicker on their. You see what I'm saying?
Yeah.
Like, so the money's going to get spent for R&D, so they're getting a tax credit, so their money goes further, and they can sometimes use those tax credit. I mean, anyway, bottom line is.
They've got good programs. They need to continue to grow those programs. Think outside the box, because we do have when I say we, Louisiana has got a stigma. It's not known as a technology hub. It's not known as a place that a technology company would go. So we've got to have, I think, extra incentives to get that traction, to get people to companies are coming here. If it's going to ever scale, it's got to be a lot more than what it is today. So
Yeah.
hopefully they'll keep expanding those programs, building more places like Louisiana Technology Park. LSU's got an incubator program to help foster and nurture these startups. Mm-hmm. I think some of these spaces could do more to help the tenants that are in here too. We talked about sales and marketing and just connecting founders with people that can help them is such a big thing. And that's, I think that's a gap that could be filled pretty easily.
Yeah. I mean, that's what we're trying to fill right here is the gap of getting people's message out there. I mean, the people won't listen to this probably the whole long form of us talking for an hour and 10 minutes, but they may listen to a couple edits that we clip up and we put out there. People are going to know Randall about software. They're going to know Barrett about real estate app. So at the end of the day, promoting brands and promoting awareness is what they do and what needs to be done, right? Because the only way you can have success, like I would be screaming from the hills about Mastery Prep. You would see it like everywhere. It would be annoying. Like people's feeds over the next year with Falaya and the content that's about to come up is going to be boom, 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 boom. It's going to be ridiculous. It's going to be like in your face.
I love that you took ownership of that.
I mean, but it has to be.
But think if you didn't, like
it has to be.
This is important.
It is.
An important
it's a
way
lifeblood. It's like water, dude. If you don't do it, it's like breathing, man. If they don't know what you're doing, it doesn't matter.
And it's for any company. Any company has to be able to market. Promotion is big part of marketing. You got to have sales. You got to have people that can sell what you're offering, and then you need all the back office functions covered too. Right. If you're a software company, you need DevOps, but any company needs marketing, sales, and back office support. Back office could be anything from accounting, legal, HR. Those are the kind of things that are pretty easy to fill. You can find service providers. You don't even have to hire those people full time. But making those connections, I think, is something that a place like this could easily do, and figure out like where these gaps. What are you missing in your organization? So knowing what the organization needs and helping them to fill those gaps, that's a huge thing.
Knowing you got to help an organization know what they do, who they're serving, and how they tell their story, right? And so if you can educate them, and they do a good job of having the quarterly calls here and like trying to get you to think about your business and who you're serving and all the stakeholders, and they try to get you thinking about that. So but the awareness, I think, is the next step. How do you help companies do that? That's why we have the green screen here. We film content that helps people understand and move through the listing process and gets them onboarded. And I think every company needs that, right? When you land on Novateus.com, how do they know what Novateus does, right? And whether that's through UX, UI, or whether that's through a video.
Video is such a powerful
I would say
thing.
It's a combination of all those things. And then how does your sales funnel work with that and telling your story? And so it all comes back to content.
Think about all the stuff you had to teach yourself and learn, and at the end of the day, you're implementing it yourself. But it took you maybe a year, 2 years to learn all of these things. And think about if you had somebody that for a reasonable cost could condense that learning curve, could even execute it without you having to do it.
Right.
Those are the kind of things that I'm talking about. And it's amazing that since this is such a big part of your business, it makes a ton of sense that you took ownership of it and you control all this instead of having to outsource it, which I think you did in the very beginning.
Well, that's the whole thing. I mean, at the end of the day, you got to realize that when you outsource something, you don't have control over it at some level. I mean, you do.
Or it can cost you a ridiculous amount.
I would say it does, right? You and I came in here. You were a little late to the podcast coming from a call, but it didn't matter, right? I continued to work. As soon as you showed up, we sat down and we turned on the thing. It was like we wasted how many minutes? Maybe 5 minutes of our life, but between this conversation being recorded. So how efficient you can be with capturing the content as well is extremely important, because you got to also service your client. I got a list of property here in about 10 minutes. I got to input pictures. You understand what I'm saying? Like that's got to happen today. So I can only sit here for so long to create the content. So how can you make it more efficient? And this space is just that, right? And it could be as powerful as somebody just turning on a phone and flipping it sideways and starting to record themselves talking in a Lowe's or a Home Depot or walking around a house and talking about, the features of the house they have listed, right? So for an agent. So it doesn't have to be complicated like this space, right?
You're thinking like a true entrepreneur, man. I love it too.
Anyway.
You're thinking about, you've built this thing that not only helps you, but can help other people. You've got people who are paying you to come in here and use all this infrastructure that you've set up. And that was never your intent. You didn't build all this out to create a business around it. But at the same time, you've built something that has helped you and is helping other people too. And probably will continue to help more and more people. And I just think that's a small little microcosm of everything that an entrepreneur does on a daily basis, just thinking about opportunities. Yeah, that's what you're always thinking about.
Yeah.
And
well, hopefully we can make this thing happen, man. I've enjoyed the conversation with you. It's been a great partnership with Novateus, and hopefully we just create some really cool stuff over the next year, and this thing just goes to the moon, and we can enjoy the ride together.
I think 2023 is going to be a big one.
Oh man, I really can't wait for the app to drop and for people to see it. I mean, it's like,
I don't want to say finally, but it's like we finally figured it out. I would say, like, we feel like, I think everybody feels like we're on the right path, and that often happens in software development, and it can be frustrating. You feel like you're zigging and zagging through the woods.
Yeah.
And sometimes you're not even on the right path to get through the woods. You could be going the completely wrong direction. So figuring out, am I even headed in the right direction, is important. And then how do I become more efficient?
Yeah.
Getting from point A to point B, more of a straight line versus this zigging and zagging. We've done a lot of zigging and zagging for the last year and a half, and it feels like that those zigs and zags have lessened a lot. So
they have, man. So I appreciate your time, Randall. Man, we'll let you get back to it, and look forward to the future in this app dropping, man, and appreciate everything.
Well, thanks for having me. I enjoyed it.
Yep. Well, hey, let them know, how do they visit Novateus if they want to do software or they want to do anything, UX, UI? Probably
the best starting point is going to our website. So www.novateus, that's NOVATEUS.com, like innovation. We tried that. Novateus. So go to our website. You can also call me directly if you want to. It's 225-308-6960. If you go to the website, you can fill out a contact request form, and we'll set up a call, and probably just an intro call, 30-minute intro call to talk about your ideas, your project, and talk about how to get started. That's usually where everything starts. And it's not a complicated, long, drawn-out thing. Usually first calls, 20, 30 minutes, and then there may be a follow-up call, but it's usually turning around a quote on design phase first with an estimate on development. And then usually once design phase is done, it's us quoting or bidding out the development too with a fixed price quote. So that's usually the start and end points. And I love working on new projects, learning new things. It's always a fun challenge. So love working with startups too.
Yeah, well, enjoy working with you, man. Appreciate everything you do for us, and look forward to 2023 and knocking it out the park, and appreciate you coming on, man.
Well, thank you.
All right, guys. We'll see you next time here on the Falaya Focus Podcast.
Yes.
Hey, guys, I wanted to take a second and say thank you for watching the Falaya Focus Podcast. At Falaya, we are reimagining the way real estate is bought and sold. So we need all the love and support we can get to grow our movement. Please tell all your friends and family about all the great things that we have going on here at Falaya. Please like, share, and subscribe to all of our content, and we'll see you next time on the Falaya Focus Podcast.